Nicolás Maduro. On January 3, 2026, the United States military launched Operation Absolute Resolve, a coordinated strike on Venezuelan military infrastructure and urban targets in Caracas. Targeted to capture President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Celia Flores, a few months earlier the United States had planned to monitor Maduro to understand how he moved and where he lived, where he traveled, and what he ate and what he wore. At approximately 2:01 local time, 150 drones, fighter jets, and bombers deployed from 20 bases in the Latin American region began their insertion into Caracas shortly before dawn. They launched missiles and bombs at radar targets, air defense systems, and military facilities in the capital to incapacitate Venezuela's air defense system. Then, U.S. helicopters landed near Maduro's residence and compound. Approximately 200 elite U.S. troops, including members of Delta Force and the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, stormed to shoot the guards of Mr. Maduro's residence. Maduro and his wife attempted to reach a safe room, but struck their heads on the shelter door and were captured by U.S. forces before it could close. Immediately, Mr. Maduro and his wife were taken on a helicopter to be brought to the U.S. following the attack. 80 civilians and members of security forces had been killed. By 4:21 a.m. Washington time, U.S. President Donald Trump posted a photograph on his Truth Social account showing Maduro blindfolded, wearing noise-canceling headphones and a gray Nike sweatsuit, aboard the amphibious assault ship USS Iwo Jima. The U.S. government said the operation targeted Maduro's alleged involvement with international cartel networks. The move instantly triggered an intense global debate, with critics condemning it as a breach of Venezuelan sovereignty and international law. According to analysts, the reason for Mr. Maduro's arrest is also related to Venezuela's vast oil reserves. The country currently has 303 billion barrels of oil, which is more than double the total amount of oil in the USA, Russia, and China. Saddam Hussein. In 2003, the United States, together with allies including the United Kingdom, Australia, and Poland, launched a military invasion of Iraq under a doctrine known as shock and awe. The operation was justified by claims that Iraqi President Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction and had links to terrorist groups. Iraq quickly collapsed into chaos. Saddam Hussein went into hiding throughout his country. In December of 2003, U.S. forces captured Mohammed Ibrahim, a trusted aide from Saddam's inner circle. After U.S. officers promised to protect his family, Ibrahim cooperated and personally led American troops to a remote village near Adar, close to Tikrit. During the Operation Red Dawn, soldiers searched 2 designated farm compounds but found no trace of Saddam. Ibrahim stepped forward and kicked a rope protruding from the ground beside a small shed. The rope exposed the entrance to a hidden underground bunker known as a spider hole. U.S. soldiers pulled Saddam Hussein from the hole where he had been hiding alone. He appeared exhausted and disheveled, with a long beard and dirt covering his clothes. Upon capture, Saddam identified himself, stating, "I am Saddam Hussein, president of Iraq, and I want to negotiate." In the early hours of December 30, 2006, Saddam was executed at Camp Justice in Baghdad. Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini, Italy's fascist dictator, was one of the most infamous figures of the 20th century, known as the founder of fascism and a close ally of Nazi Germany during World War II. By April of 1945, Mussolini's regime had collapsed. He was stripped of power and arrested by his own government. However, Germany rescued him and made him the puppet leader of a small area in northern Italy called the Republic of Salo. But as Allied forces advanced through the northern Italy, the Republic of Salo collapsed. Mussolini fled Milan with his mistress, Clara Petacchi, and loyalists disguised him in a German military uniform. He joined a retreating German convoy and attempted to escape towards Switzerland. On April 27, 1945, Italian partisans stopped the convoy near the village of Dongo, along Lake Como. Fighters searched the vehicles. At first, Mussolini remained silent, keeping his head down. However, partisans recognized his facial features. They arrested him without resistance and took him into custody along with Petacci. The following day, April 28th, partisans moved Mussolini and Petacci to the village of Giuliano di Mezzagara, acting in orders from the Italian resistance leadership. A partisan commander executed both of them by firing squad. Mussolini died instantly. Petacci was killed beside him. Their bodies were transported to Milan and taken to Piazza Loreto, a public square. There, partisans put the corpses on the ground. A crowd gathered. People kicked the bodies, spat on them, and struck them with rage. Authorities then hung Mussolini's body upside down from a metal beam, alongside Petacci and other executed fascists. Mussolini's death marked the definitive collapse of Italian fascism. Muammar Gaddafi. In 2011, Libya descended into civil war following an uprising against their leader, Muammar Gaddafi. NATO launched an air campaign to support rebel forces, citing the protection of civilians. As rebel groups advanced, Gaddafi fled the capital, Tripoli, and attempted to regroup in his hometown of Sirte, his final stronghold. On October 20, 2011, Gaddafi attempted to escape Sirte in a convoy of vehicles. As the convoy moved out of the city, it was detected and struck by NATO airstrikes, which disabled several vehicles and forced survivors to scatter. Gaddafi fled on foot and took shelter in a concrete drainage pipe beneath the road. Rebel fighters soon discovered him hiding inside the pipe. He was dragged out by armed fighters and beaten while surrounded by a chaotic crowd. Witnesses reported that he was stabbed and assaulted as he was pulled through the streets. Shortly afterward, Gaddafi was shot at close range. Libyan authorities later confirmed that he died from gunshot wounds while in rebel custody. His son, Mu'tasim Gaddafi, was also captured alive and executed by firing squad the same day. Gaddafi's body was transported to Misrata, where it was placed in a refrigerator meat locker and displayed publicly for several days. His death marked the collapse of the Libyan state. Nicolae Ceaușescu. In December 1989, mass protests against Nicolae Ceaușescu erupted across Romania, beginning in the city of Timișoara. Security forces opened fire on demonstrators, killing civilians and accelerating nationwide unrest. On December 21st, Ceaușescu attempted a public speech in Bucharest. The crowd turned hostile, shouting him down on live television, leading to a coup against him. By the next morning, the rebellion had spread to all major cities. Vasile Milei, the defense minister of Ceaușescu, took his own life. Believing Milei had been murdered, nearly all the soldiers switched sides and joined the revolution. Ceaușescu and his wife, Elena, fled headquarters by helicopter from the rooftop. Mid-flight, the helicopter pilot received warnings that military forces might shoot them down. He landed the aircraft near the town of Snagov. Local soldiers surrounded the couple and took them into custody without resistance. They were transported to a nearby military garrison where they were confined in a small room under armed guard. On December 25, 1989, the new revolutionary leader organized a swift military tribunal. Ceaușescu faced charges including genocide, crimes against the state, and economic sabotage. The tribunal delivered an immediate death sentence. Minutes later, soldiers escorted Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu into a courtyard. They were positioned against a wall. A firing squad opened fire without delay. Both were killed instantly. The entire execution was filmed and later broadcast on Romanian television. Slobodan Milošević. Slobodan Milošević, who ruled Serbia through the 1990s and later served as president of Yugoslavia, was one of the most notorious figures in the Balkan Wars. After mass protests in October of 2000, Milošević lost power and retreated to his residence in Belgrade. On the evening of March 31, 2001, Serbian police and special security units surrounded Milošević's compound. Authorities cut off electricity, water, and telephone lines, sealing the area to prevent outside interference. Negotiators attempted to persuade him to surrender peacefully. Milošević refused. He barricaded himself inside the residence with armed guards. In the early hours of April 1, 2001, security forces deployed tear gas into the compound to force compliance. Shortly afterward, Milošević emerged from the building and surrendered without shots being fired. On June 28, Serbian authorities secretly transferred Milošević by plane to The Hague. Prosecutors charged him with genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. The trial dragged on for years, repeatedly delayed by his declining health. On March 11, 2006, guards found Milošević dead in his prison cell at the UN Detention Center in The Hague. The autopsy confirmed he died of a heart attack. No verdict was ever reached. Manuel Noriega. In December of 1989, the United States launched Operation Just Cause, a military invasion of Panama. They claimed that the leader Manuel Noriega threatened U.S. citizens, undermined democracy, and operated as a major drug trafficker linked to international cartels. The U.S. forces rapidly overwhelmed Panama's defense forces. Panama City fell into chaos as Noriega's regime collapsed. By December 24th, Noriega realized he could no longer evade capture. He entered the Apostolic Nunciature, the Vatican's diplomatic mission in Panama City, believing that U.S. forces would not violate the neutrality of religious compounds. The American troops surrounded the area but stopped short of storming the building. Instead, U.S. military units positioned loudspeakers around the compound and blasted high-volume rock music continuously, including heavy metal and pop tracks day and night. The tactic aimed to deprive Noriega of sleep, increasing stress, and signal that he had no path to escape. Inside, Noriega remained isolated under Vatican supervision, with limited contact with the outside world. As days passed, Noriega's mental and physical condition reportedly deteriorated. The Vatican quietly pressured him to surrender, seeking to avoid a prolonged standoff. After 10 days, Noriega conceded defeat. On January 3, 1990, he walked out of the Vatican mission and surrendered to U.S. forces without resistance. Soldiers immediately placed him under arrest, searched him, and transported him by military aircraft to the United States. On May 29, 2017, Manuel Noriega died in a hospital in Panama City at the age of 83. Charles Taylor. Charles Taylor, the 22nd president of Liberia, was one of Africa's most notorious warlords. After resigning from power in 2003 due to the Second Liberian Civil War and international pressure for war crimes and crimes against humanity, Taylor fled into exile in Nigeria. On March 25, 2006, Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo announced that Taylor would be handed over, and within days, Taylor vanished from his guarded residence. Disguised and traveling with loyalists, large sums of cash, and weapons, he attempted to flee toward the Cameroon border, hoping to escape deeper into Central Africa. Nigerian authorities immediately launched a high-profile manhunt, setting up roadblocks and tightening border controls. On March 29, 2006, security forces intercepted his vehicle near the border town of Gambaru, where Taylor was found hiding in the car and arrested without resistance. Taylor was flown to Liberia and then transferred to the custody of the United Nations. To prevent instability, the UN moved the trial to The Hague. In 2012, Taylor became the first former head of state since World War II to be convicted by an international tribunal. Judges sentenced him to 50 years in prison. Hosni Mubarak. In early 2011, mass protests erupted across Egypt. Millions filled the streets, demanding an end to Mubarak's rule. After weeks of demonstrations and mounting pressure from the military, Mubarak resigned on February 11, 2011, ending his presidency. After his resignation, Mubarak retreated to the Red Sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh. Public anger, however, did not subside. On April 13, 2011, Egypt's public prosecutor formally ordered Mubarak's detention. Security forces placed him under arrest inside a military hospital in Sharm el-Sheikh and later brought him to court on a stretcher inside a metal cage. Prosecutors charged him with ordering the killing of protesters, corruption, and abuse of power. In 2012, an Egyptian court sentenced Mubarak to life imprisonment. However, by 2017, Mubarak was acquitted of the final remaining charges and released from the detention center after nearly 6 years in custody. Mubarak lived his final years largely out of public view, frequently hospitalized and in declining health. On February 25, 2020, he died at the age of 91 in a military hospital in Cairo. Omar al-Bashir. By late 2018, demonstrations quickly spread and turned into calls for President Omar al-Bashir's removal. Security forces responded with force, killing protesters and imposing emergency laws. On April 11, 2019, the Sudanese military intervened. Army officers arrested Omar al-Bashir inside the presidential compound and announced his removal on state television. He was arrested by his own former soldiers. Guards disarmed his personal security detail, and Bashir was taken into custody under heavy escort. They dissolved the government, suspended the constitution, and placed Bashir in detention at Kober Prison, the same facility where he had once jailed his opponents. On the 5th of November 2019, Sudanese prosecutors charged him with corruption, illegal possession of foreign funds, and responsibility for the killing of protesters. To this day, Omar al-Bashir remains alive and in a detention in Sudan, convicted of corruption charges while still facing possible prosecution for genocide and war crimes at the International Criminal Court. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and tell me which story you want next. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.